Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Technical Library. I am sorry for the delay, but have we got a story for you today? Our guest storyteller this afternoon is here for a repeat performance. Russ Kaldenberg is our command archaeologist, and he first spoke to us back in October of 2004, and at that time he was our second speaker in our storytelling events. At that sharing, Russ told us stories of Paleolithic China Lake, painting for us a very vivid picture of our lush green valley here at China Lake as it was more than 10,000 years ago. As many of you may know, each of our recordings are then edited, put onto DVDs, and we add them to our circulating collection here at the library. I checked yesterday, and the 2 DVDs that we have of Russ's first program have checked out 26 times. That is pretty impressive. I am sure that the stories that we have today for you are going to be just as exciting. So in honor of National Library Week, please help me welcome Russ Kaldenberg.
National Library Week, wow. I only want to say a couple things because we're late, but we're going to have the first part of the presentation is going to be the movie actually that was made by Mark and Bill on our project that was at a place called Old Fort Coso. Just to give you sort of an idea of where it is, if you think of Olancha, where Olancha is, the southern end of Owens Lake, you drive a little bit to the east and a little bit south, and there's a community called Darwin, California. This is 6 miles southwest of Darwin in the Coso Mountains at a spring that's currently called Darwin Springs. In 1876, when Wheeler and his Army expedition were through the area, it was called McGinnis Springs. Before that, it was called Granite Springs. But it's called Darwin Springs after Darwin French, who silver mine and so forth in the area. Today, this place where these buildings are provide the water for the community of Darwin. So let's take a look at what Mark and Bill have done, and then we'll go into part 2 of the presentation with a short break.
Long before the Navy came to China Lake, the area was home to other warriors. In the 1860s, hostilities between miners and Native Americans in the Cosos were on the rise. This during an era when the U.S. Army was actively involved in protecting settlers from Native Americans throughout the West. On July 4, 1862, Camp Independence was established in the Owens Valley to help protect the state against Confederate invasion and to control Native Americans in the area. Several years later, it appears that Camp Independence established a small outpost in the Coso mining district at Darwin Springs. Little is known about this outpost. Sketchy evidence from historical accounts suggests that it was used by the cavalry to help protect prospectors and miners in the Coso district and the water source at Darwin Springs from Native Americans in the area. Today, only the ruins of the outpost, now known as Fort Coso, remain. In 1998, extensive fieldwork and research was conducted to evaluate the site and to determine if Old Fort Coso could warrant inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places. fort consists of the ruins of 3 structures. A 4-room barracks next to the spring is built of cut and dressed granite blocks and mud mortar. There are 2 fireplaces with chimneys, 1 window, and several doors. A redoubt or lookout structure constructed of roughly cut, undressed rock rests high on a ridge above the barracks. Gun ports built into the walls suggest the purpose of the structure. An explosives magazine or storage facility, also constructed of roughly cut stone, lies between the 2. The report concluded that 1. The stone buildings at the site are representative of a type of construction that is rare in the region. 2. Because the overall condition of the site is excellent, it may yield comparative information valuable in a study of outposts in the West during the Civil War era. And 3. Compared to other outposts that have been recorded in the Mojave, the site is remarkably intact. The relationship between the various buildings is evident. The barracks and redoubt retain their original configuration, and there is a strong sense of time and place while standing at the barracks or crouching in the redoubt and peering through the gun ports. After over 150 years, the redoubt and magazine remain in excellent condition. The barracks, however, is showing its age. Weeds and other vegetation are weakening the foundation, and rocks have fallen from the chimneys. The report recommended that a stabilization plan be implemented as soon as possible. In 2006, China Lake received a small grant from DoD's Public Lands Day Legacy Program to help stabilize the barracks. On September 30th, 2006, 33 volunteers made a coordinated assault on the barracks that would have been the envy of any of the fort's adversaries in the 1860s. With rakes and saws and drills, instead of bows and arrows and rifles, the group pulled weeds, cut wood, and stabilized the chimneys and several walls.
We need a crew on the fireplace there, and that crew will do the wall. Then we need about 5 people in each of the rooms here to get the vegetation out.
The barracks is now safe from collapse. And largely because many similar outposts in the West have been reduced to rubble, the well-preserved condition of old Fort Coso makes it a valuable part of history to study.
Bravo, very nice. You guys did a great job. Any questions before we start in phase 2 here? John DePaul stuff. This is not mine. This is John's. The next thing he made this presentation the 21st of September, 9 days before we were out there. So what I'm going to do is I'll send over the formal presentation to the library, and you guys can check out, that has all the photos and the archival photographs that I tracked down and so forth that John didn't have privilege of having. But I'll go through his and I'll ad-lib where we know a little more than what he knew 9 days before our project. And you guys we'll get Dan Zelko to send you the right website. You can do that. Excuse me. Yes, sir.
Is Fort Coso inside the base or outside?
No, it's inside the base. Uh-huh, yeah.
It's very hard to access.
Oh, it's very difficult to access. The only people who really go up there are the people from Darwin that work on their water project. It's a very protected place. It's not available for sightseers. You know, you have to have a reason to go there. And our reason for us to go there was to stabilize it. The grant we received was a legacy grant for Public Lands Day. The maximum you can get is $6,500. We received $1,300. Everything else was volunteer labor. All of the partners donated, some of the partners donated T-shirts. The Park Service donated some expertise. The Friends of China Lake Archaeology with Bill Gossett and those folks that had their four-wheel drive crane truck that they volunteered. Everybody donated gasoline. Somebody donated the toilet for the outhouses. So it was a real nice partnership. Eastern California Museum donated photographs. So it was an excellent partnership. Fort Independence, Indian tribe, donated labor, and they donated cleanup labor in bags. We hauled out 6,000 pounds of trash. That's a lot of trash. 2 full pickup loads of trash. Anyway, let's talk about what John's talked about here, and I said I'll tell you what else we know. For those of you that wondered where we were, this is the base. We're way up here. Oh, I have a pointer here, don't I? Somewhere how the pointer works. Well, we're way up in here. Right now we're down in here, right there. So this fort is right about here in the eastern portion of the Coso Mountains. This information about Indian Wars, this was a hotbed of Indian Wars. The Owens Valley area was there were conflicts all over. What happened during the Civil War was a lot of folks fled to California. California was one of those states that didn't know for sure whether it wanted to go south or north in the Civil War. And a lot of the southern plantation owners came to the Owens Valley, with them. They brought their own opinions of different people besides themselves, and the Indians had a tough time. 1861 was basically when folks started coming here, but 1862, 1863, there were a lot of conflicts. The 12th Cavalry Regiment of Volunteers established Camp Independence in 1862. In 1863, actually this month, there was a massive massacre of Indian people in the Lake Isabella area. Actually, we have Indian people today, as we speak, at Coso Hot Springs doing a 3-day ceremony commemorating the slaughter of about 30 people by an Army regiment for no reason other than to say, we are controlling the area, folks. There was no provocation on that particular incident. But as such, the settlers here were in jeopardy. The Indians had the upper hand for quite a while, and one of the issues that we have with Fort Coso is it a fort or is it not? Is it something else? There's no documentation on it. That's why excavation is absolutely necessary to see if we can find out what was going on there. There was a woman named Elizabeth Meacham. Elizabeth Meacham has written extensive letters about when she was a child at the town on base called Millspaw. Millspaw was the only town on this base that had a post office. It was up by Junction Ranch. Elizabeth grew up there. Old Fort Coso was a few miles from Millspaw. She said as a child, playing at the fort, she found handguns and cavalry bayonets and cavalry buttons. Well, maybe so, maybe not. It's all oral history. A few weeks ago, at a fortuitous incident, I tracked down her son. Her son is 90 years old. He lives in Sacramento. He says they have about 30 boxes of Elizabeth's letters, drawings, photographs that have been sealed since she passed away in 1982. Am I interested in coming up and looking at them? Well, you know, when can I get up there? So that might put some more light on it. We had in 1998 a study done to see if the sites were eligible for the National Register. That's a criteria, that's a federal criteria. If it's eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, which is like a phone book, you list the information, the site in this directory based upon whether it's got integrity, whether it's information important to history, whether people are associated, that's important, and it needs to be over 50 years old unless it's something like Dulles Airport, which is on the National Register because it was a nice architectural design. So we contracted with folks and they said, yeah, it's real important and it probably is an old fort, but you know, more information is needed. Actually, they said, yeah, it is an old fort. So we call it Old Fort Coso because Pop Lofnick, in his book Desert Ramblings, said the old miners that were there told them it was Fort Coso. So there's a lot of oral history that's not corroborated, and we are starting to try to put that together. Now, this is, you saw in the film we just saw, the barracks are down there, the spring is right down here. The so-called ruins of the redoubt, is that working? Oh, yeah, I guess I have to hold down. This is, see how it was overgrown in 1998? This is the magazine part, probably that's the redoubt. It overlooks Darwin Springs, and you see the loopholes, and you saw them in the presentation where rifles would have gone through to protect whatever was down here. One of the issues is, why in the world would the Army put something that looks like a fort down here defenseless? Because they couldn't see by coming at them, and from somebody up in this redoubt, they can be shot pretty easily because they're sitting ducks basically. So that's one of the things if it is a fort. If it's not a fort, what is it? Here's an overview of it. And there it is again with the walls. We did knock some rocks off, if you noticed. We did that for protection so it wouldn't hit somebody in the head. And Captain Storch was up there, and all I kept thinking was, oh my Lord, the commanding officer, ex-commanding officer's gonna die. This is the plan. There's a fireplace here, room for 12 or 15 cots easily here. This place has glass windows. It was a well-designed, well-dressed building. It wasn't done by a slovenly miner. It was done with purpose, with an architectural design. And this shows this guy in 1998. I guess, we don't know. This picture just showed up in a report. All it says is a picture on the fireplace. This is a fireplace that we've stabilized. This is a rock here that we knocked off so it wouldn't fall on the Storch's head. And here's the interior of it. And you notice how well dressed the rocks are here. The stone is really good stonework. The stonework, if any of you have been to Anthony Mill Ruins in Panamint Valley, it's the town of Riley. It was operative in 1880 to 81. It had a post office also. There are no known postmarks from it. Any of you stamp collectors out there that found one, you'd find a treasure. But the stonework is very, very similar to that. Really well dressed. BLM manages it as a historic site. It's on the National Register. This photograph is taken about 1900. This is courtesy of Tom Chapman, who works on the base, and I think the Tomahawk program or one of the programs like that. He found it at a yard sale. It is absolutely the place. I also found, and I had it in my presentation, one that Pop Lofnick took in 1953 in the snow that's just absolutely gorgeous. Well, there he is there. This is a different one of him. But here's Pop, 1956, at the chimney that, the second chimney, the east chimney, with a lot of rubble. You see the sidearm he's carrying. He was the first range patrol guy. He lived up at Junction Ranch. And if you haven't read his book on the history of the range, man, it's a real interesting book. I wouldn't want to run into that guy. You were running into Essinger and Willard probably. And here's a readout right here. And see the loopholes? This is where there are also gun ports. So definitely it's some kind of defensive structure. And this is a plan view of the readout. And there's a lot of fill in here. We have money that we just transferred over to Epsilon Systems to excavate units in here and units in the big building with the two chimneys that we believe or is called the old fort. And sometime in the next few weeks we'll start excavation. Hopefully we'll find some artifacts that we can associate with either military or some other activity that was there. Now, one thing that probably you guys are historians that know about this place is there's lousy history in this part of the state of California. Part of it's 3 counties coming together. There is no book except Chalfont's book called The Story of Inyo County that was published originally in the 1930s that really talks about the history here. There's a Boys in the Sky Blue Pants by Dorothy Cragen that talks about the history of Fort Independence. She did no original research. All hers is secondary research. You have to go back to the original sources. You have to go to the archives in DC and St. Louis to find this kind of stuff. So while we have minimal history, you know, we're trying to build it through our program and through the Bandaranga Museum, Forensic China Lake Archaeology, Eastern California Museum, trying to piece it together. Try to find anything out about our South Range, about the history of South Range. It's just impossible because no one's gone back through the archives. That's very tedious work. We know there are people all over. The other day we were out, this is a little side, but this is sort of paint a picture of history you don't know about. We were out of Lead Pipe Springs. Lead Pipe Springs is South Range. There's bandit graves there, according to old photos, 1922. Found them. They look exactly like they did in the 1922 picture. Went over to another wash. There was JWS initials, gorgeous, beautiful initials, February 14th, Valentine's Day, 1863. You know who JWS was? John W. Searles, Searles Valley. It's only the third known inscription of him. One's at the History House in Trona, the other's up at Copper Queen Mine, and this one. And it's beautiful, and it's exactly the same. And found a bottle that looked like a medicine bottle. Now, was he associated with the so-called bandit graves? Don't know. But there's no history on that. It's more research. Somebody's dissertation or thesis project. This base is full of that kind of opportunity. This was a report that Mary Maneri did. And here's what her research conclusions were. The old fort site seems to have been associated with Camp Independence. It's a stretch because it just seems like the right date. It served as an outpost for patrolling troops, 1862 to 1867. The old fort meets criteria, it's unique, preservation site's excellent, compared to other posts on the Mojave, it's remarkably intact. Well, the other posts are Camp Katy, which is in very bad shape, and Fort Paiute, which is now Park Service managed over by the Colorado River. And it has been really, they've done a nice job. They've taken all the rocks and put them back together, and they're starting to interpret them. But that's it. There isn't anything else. Additional research is needed. What other surprises might be hidden in China Lake, million acres? Any ideas? Okay, that's John. Now let me tell you where we're going from here. What we found out was that the metal detecting turned up absolutely nothing. Has that been scavenged? You know, people like Elizabeth Meacham, who was there for a long time, in and out as a kid, picking up stuff. What she picked up, was it really associated with the Army? Well, what happens after every war? Army surplus. Miners being poor probably went out and bought stuff at an Army surplus store. They would have bought things with cavalry buttons on them. So does that mean that this wasn't a fort? No, it just means there's something we ought to throw in the mix too about surplus food, surplus frying pans, surplus buttons. Secondarily, no original research at the archives have been done. The Army took meticulous records. They had paymasters. Every month they had to have a report about where they went, what they did. We haven't located any of those things. Those are, if they exist, they're in the Army records in Washington, D.C. Secondarily, they had muster records. The muster records told the name of the people that were there. Who was there, how many people, where did they go every day? And third, when you're out, when you get hurt in the service, even those days, you could retire. So there's retirement papers. So you need names of people, though, to get the retirement papers. We need to send somebody to D.C. to take a look at that stuff. All in Washington, D.C., all in the archives and all available. We have the money to do that now, and we're going to send somebody or get somebody there to go and spend about a week at the archives taking a look. And there will be treasures there. One of the most important Indian battles in the Owens Valley, the last documented one, occurred in 1867. It occurred right here on this base at a place called Crystal Springs. Chief Barbie of the Paiutes was killed, and seven of his folks were killed by the cavalry coming up over from Coso Peak and riding down. There was a group of 20 Indians. Nobody ever made it back to Fort Independence. So all the people who were lost along the way, ran off, or were killed along the way. So this base has incredible history, and it has incredible interest by Indian people. We have 7 federally recognized tribes that we deal with, and a lot of non-federally recognized tribes. Many of you probably know about Coso Hot Springs. I said we had people there today. Coso Hot Springs is a sacred site because of healing power, not only for the Indian people, but for non-Indian people in the 1920s and 30s, where there was a hot springs and healing power, and they had a Coso water bottle. You could drink that crappy water and supposedly heal. Well, Indians are very interested in this base. They were living here in 1943. I've talked to one individual who had not been back on the base since he was a kid, and we brought him back to Indian Springs Gardens where he was born. And we have a picture of him when he's 3 years old in a water tank, a horse trough there, having taken a bath. And he remembers when he said it was the Army, and might have been, came and said they had to leave tomorrow. And he said, tomorrow? His mom said, no, today. Oh, today? Because you have a choice. You can either walk to Darwin, or we'll take you in a truck and we'll drive you to Darwin. And I said, what'd you do? He goes, well, I got in a truck. I drove to Darwin. There was an Indian colony in Darwin. That's just near the Navy's base. And I said, well, what do you feel about the Navy? Or Army, because he thought it was the Army, and it might have been the Army. He said, he pulls out his baseball cap, puts it on. He said, I joined the Navy in World War II with his baseball cap. But memories are long. We're still with those generations. Today, our environmental division works very closely with Indian people and trying to get some of their history, what they'll share. And they have some incredible history so they haven't shared. I'll tell you just a couple stories that loosely it's associated with this area, but not exactly Fort Coso. One is that there's scratched rock art. A lot of you guys have seen rock art up on the base. We have a National Historic Landmark. Scratches. Archaeologists debate if it means the Nummic people came in and they vandalized the pre-Nummic people's rock art. So we were up collecting, Tom, my boss there, was up there collecting pinyon nuts with the folks, letting them in to collect pine nuts, where they collected pine nuts in the 1930s and 1940s. And this lady was making noise on a rock. And she was making scratches, like numbing scratching. I said, what are you doing? She says, what? What do you mean? I said, well, you're making scratches? Yeah, it's called, I'm pinging, P-I-N-G-I-N-G, pinging. I said, well, what does it mean? She goes, nothing. It's just I'm waiting for other people to finish collect the pine nuts, and we're talking. My mom used to do it. My grandma used to do it. Pinging. Never documented it before. And I asked this one elderly gentleman that talked about being kicked off the base when he was a teenager. I said, what does rock art mean? Anybody ever tell you what rock art meant? He goes, oh no, I don't know anything about it. No, I wish I did. And so I heard him talking to his daughter. And he said, you know what my mom did? And so I listened, and it was a really neat story. I said, can I hear? He goes, oh, I didn't know you'd be interested. So he said that at night, when they were living up by Darwin, probably Indian Springs when he was young, he'd hear peck, 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 peck on the rocks. And his mom would grab the kids in. They would go into the house. She'd put her hand in flour, and she'd spread flour around the corner of the house, all of which to protect from the bad spirits. So by 1930s, bad spirits. And it was the bad doctors. Don't believe anything about shaman. They never had shaman here. They had doctors. And Indian doctors were both good and bad. So mom would take them in and protect them from the bad stuff. Very similar to the Southwest. In the Southwest, to purify a place and to bring good spirits back, they'd put their hand into cornmeal and spread cornmeal to the corners of the hogan or the corners of the house. A lot of similarities there. The other is Mark R. Harrington interviewed a guy named Buster Hansen, who's Leland Hansen, who was killed in the Korean War, at Little Lake. And Buster came through one day while they were excavating a site, and he asked Buster to explain petroglyphs, rock art. Buster said, oh, they were made by the little people that came out of the ground. That's all bad medicine. You want to stay away from them. We have millions of petroglyph elements on this site, on this base. We have a National Historic Landmark that's 36,000 acres that nothing occurs on the ground there. Overflight's okay, but nothing on the ground. We're protecting them not only for the future, but we're protecting for the Indian people. We've just trained Indian people how to do all the security stuff to take their people back in to see the petroglyphs, and they're there. We have the Coso hot springs I mentioned a couple times, where people go there for purification ceremonies, and the Lake Isabella people are going to be there for, I think, 3 days. Is that right, John and Tom? I think 3 days. And we let them in, they do their thing, we leave them alone, they come back out. They're also collecting obsidian. This base has 2 of the most important obsidian sources. That's black glass, volcanic glass, sources in the western United States. That obsidian is traced all the way to Baja California, Catalina Island, all the way to Wyoming, where the last most easternly obsidian source is in Yellowstone, and it finds its way all the way to the East Coast. We haven't found any what's called Coso obsidian on the East Coast yet, but might be there. You know, sort of dispels the myth that people before the Europeans came here, non-Indians lived in little teeny valleys and never got out of the valleys. They moved around a lot of places. The last little story is I took a Hopi elder to Little Petroglyph Canyon last year, and she was amazed by these giant petroglyphs and all this kind of stuff. And she stopped at one and she looked at it. She says, "Oh my gosh!" I said, "Oh, what do you see?" And she says, "If this was in Hopi land, this would be a weather kachina, and this would be a wind kachina." You know, the pictures, the petroglyphs. I said, "Really?" She says, "Oh yeah, I know it's not Hopi land, but that's identical. If you took those petroglyphs and transported them to northwestern Arizona, or northwestern New Mexico, northeastern Arizona, it would look like stuff that the Hopis did." Very, very strong possibility that over 10,000 years, remember, what you see is three-dimensional. You see space, and you see the object depth of the petroglyphs, but what you don't see is time. You don't know if that was done 10,000 years ago or in 1940. Leland Hansen's initials are all over the North Range. He grazed the Buster Hansen, that was killed in Korea. His grave is up at Darwin. If any of you are in Darwin, visit the Darwin Cemetery. It is incredible. Besides Elizabeth Meacham up there, she died in 1982, it's full of Indian graves with petroglyph headstones. They're still burying today. It is not a legal cemetery, and they're trying to make it legal. They called me up the other day and said, "Can you help us make it legal?" Well, that's BLM. I don't have anything to do with BLM. You know, when I was with BLM, I made the Bodie Cemetery legal because it's possible. But Inyo County still allows burial in a place like this, at cemetery, because that's where the Indian people traditionally have buried that lived in that particular area. Back to Coso, Fort Coso. Okay, we're going to do two things. We're going to excavate professionally, write a report up, see if we can find anything underground, see if they'll give us a clue. I'll go up some weekend to Sacramento and talk to Elizabeth Meacham's dad before he passes away, being 90 years old. And I want to look at what's in those boxes. Dina has transcribed, what? Deanna, sorry. Deanna has transcribed hundreds of pages of Elizabeth Meacham's letters and some of Dorothy Cragen's letters. George Pipkin was the editor of the Trona Argonaut out in Trona, and his daughter, Margaret Brush, has given me access to all the letters that were sent by Elizabeth to her dad. They probably had a little latent love affair by letters back in the 1970s, but it really kind of fills out the letters and her passion for the history of the Argus Mountains and the Coso areas. So she's transcribed those, and we're going to now start editing and put them together so we have a little more information on the history of it. And then we're going to re-chink with mortar, a lot of the rocks that are in Old Fort Coso. It's a couple-year project. It won't be done in 1 year because that's a big building. But we need to excavate, particularly where you find stuff that's important to history, is in front of the fireplaces. People ate there, they cooked their food in front of fireplaces, they got warm in the winter, they lost stuff. When we excavated the town site of Riley, had to be the chief engineer's house. Right in front of the fireplace were glasses that he lost, dice, dominoes, all kinds of stuff that showed sort of the life of the community out at Riley. A man named James Barnes did his master's thesis on that as a spectacular master's thesis. We still don't have any photographs of Riley when it was built, but we certainly have. The National Park Service came out and stabilized about 40 of the buildings out there. Believe it or not, there are about 70 buildings out there, and you can't see it till you get up there because it's built out of native stone. Fort Coso is kind of like that too. You can't really see it till you get up there. Built out of native stone. You saw what the redoubt looked like. Pretty spectacular place. And there's a grave up there. And one of our wonderful volunteers, Bill Gossett, and his wife Barbara went to the local newspapers, and we know exactly who's buried in that grave. Said he was buried on a hill 7 miles southwest of Darwin, overlooking Darwin Springs. And we know exactly where this man was buried now. And we thought maybe a soldier was buried there, but no, it was an old miner. He was buried in 1917. We've started marking a lot of grave sites here on the base so the bulldozers don't actually hit them. And our volunteers, Friends of China Lake Archaeology, we meet on Flex Fridays at Building 1022, and we organize our 500,000 artifacts. We do the cleaning, we do the sweeping, we do research. People do research all the time. We're trying to, for Tom back there, we're trying to get a compendium of spring sites. What were their old names and what are their names today, because they changed through history. And there are treasures everywhere. There are treasures out there. And those of you that know Dennis Casebeer, East Mojave Cultural and Historical Center out in Goffs, California, know he started with an idea, and he has now tens of thousands of records. He has 1,100 oral histories of people that lived, grew up, and died in the East Mojave. And that's sort of the objective here with Friends of China Lake Archaeology, is to start documenting some of this stuff, because once it's gone, once the oral history's gone, it's dead, you can't get it anymore. All you get is hearsay. And hearsay is okay, but archaeologists like to do the best they can, and historians try to nail some of this stuff down. I talked to Remy Nadeau the other day, the third. There's a Remy Nadeau freight wagon road and went from Los Angeles through this area to Darwin, to Panama, the old Panama City, to Ballarat. He's 83 years old, and he said, "Oh, you talked to me 4 or 5 years ago. You haven't called me back." No, I hadn't called him back since then. He's still alive. He said, "I'd sure like to come up there and see my grandpa's stage stations and stuff." We'll make it happen. He said, "Oh, got some pictures you might want to look at." Okay. Anyway, that's sort of my presentation. I said I'll get my one that tells you what I just told you. I'll put it in here because we got the Sherlock Holmes is a good story, but it's not what you guys came for. Sherlock Holmes is how we do detective work as Friends of China Lake Archaeology and find out stuff. Could you show the last 3 pictures in that Sherlock Holmes thing? 'Cause I want to show them something right before I close of what we found that I think you guys will really be mesmerized by, because it's detective work. Yeah, it's go to the last, the next to last pictures. Go way down, the Indian ladies in the baskets. Okay, should be that one or the next one. Take a second to load. So I think this is worth seeing because it's pure detective work. I gave a presentation called Sherlock Holmes Had Nothing on Us about all the value of Tom Chapman's collections and things like that, and how we, yeah, okay, these two photos here, those two. All right. This is Elizabeth Hanson. She was a remarkable basket maker. I found these photos at Eastern California Museum. It said Onyx Springs. Nobody had a clue where Onyx Springs was. Oh, wrong way. Okay. Well, but I'll tell a story while you learn. So, with some of our volunteers, we started talking. Onyx Springs is not on a map, but Onyx Springs happens to be in the Argus Mountains on the west side of Panamint Valley. One of my volunteers just happens to own Onyx Springs. Didn't know this. You know, I was talking to him one day, and I said, I would love to find this site.
He doesn't like me.
It's because it's got an elderly lady holding a basket right beside a wiki-up. I said, one of the reasons I want to see what does a wiki-up look like when it's gone. And yeah, so he said, well, his name's Bill Gossett. Some of you know Bill. He used to work on the base. Well, I might be able to help you with that. What do you want to do with it? And I told him, he goes, well, I don't let people on my private land, you know. I said, well, I don't take anything. He goes, well, come on up. So he took me out to his private property at Seven Springs, Onyx Springs. And I showed him the picture. He goes, well, get in a car. So we got in a car. We drove down to this exact location. Wiki-up is now down. It's just a rock ring. This is Panamint. That's in the Panamint Mountains over there. And he goes, I think my mom told me about this Isabel being here. I said, wow. He said, yeah. I said, I think that picture was taken in 1961 or 62. Well, it was taken in 1961. She died in 1962. And I said, you know, it would be really cool if we could find out what happened to that basket. He says, well, boy, I don't know, because that's a long time ago. So we sent out people. We got together with local people that knew Elizabeth or knew of her and said, well, man, I heard rumors about that basket going here, there, here, there, here, there, here, there. So Bill started looking and Barbara started looking and Bill White and a couple of volunteers. We found them. It's not one basket, it's two baskets. She's holding a basket with a bighorn sheep design and with a rattlesnake design, abstract bighorn sheep in a diamond. And she gave them to a guy named Sterling in 1961 for being nice to her. This is her wiki-up and this is her tar paper shack at the same place. Next one. There they are. They were found in a home here in Ridgecrest. The man is a chain smoker. They were in the same box that his parents put him in 1962, in, let's say, to be kind of hovel, you know, afraid that they would just go up and smoke, you know, with them accidentally smoking in bed, which he did, and he said he did. So privately, not through the base, but as a part of our base function, we raised money from Searles Valley Historical Society in Trona, which is the closest place to them, and we bought them. And they're now on display. This was about 3 months of work to get this. We raised the money. We had an ice cream social and that kind of stuff out there where I live in Trona, and raised them, and it's spectacular. These have, like, they've never been touched by anybody except maybe Elizabeth and people that bought them. We took them up to Beth Porter at Eastern California Museum to have them authenticated, and she said at auction they could go for $25,000, or they could go for $3,000 or $4,000. So we offered the man a fair value and purchased them, and we're still doing ice cream socials to pay for them. But Provenius baskets are the rarest of all kinds because the Indian makers did not sign the baskets. You could tell sometimes by the coiling and so forth. But anyway, that's the kind of stuff that we do with our group. Tom's been there, helped us out a couple times, and we work from, well, I'll say the volunteers generally work from 8 to 1 on Flex Fridays, and then sometimes we go out in the field and do things like find the John Searles signature and things like that to give them some break from the tediousness of sweeping and mopping and, you know, that kind of stuff. Anyway, Sherlock Holmes had nothing on us. We can find this stuff too. So And we found lots of stuff like this, but this is just one of the most spectacular. All right, any questions? You've been a great group, as Jack Benny would say.
Okay, well, thank you very much,
Zero,
Russ.
thank you.
We have a big poster for you.
Thank you.
And, of course, a certificate of appreciation.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming. And join us because volunteerism's contagious. My dad used to always say that he'd volunteer. He was a volunteer beekeeper for about 40 years. It's like, I don't even like honey. What are you doing this stuff for? Oh, it's just I like to do it. So, anyway, I'm around for a few minutes if anybody wants to say anything. And thank you guys for doing all your video work back there. And one thing about volunteers, never forget to thank them. Somebody asked me, how do you keep volunteers? You thank them when they come, and you thank them when they leave. Because if not, there's always someplace else to volunteer. So, thank you guys for coming and volunteering.
Thank you. Be sure to fill out your evaluations that were on your chairs. You can leave them at the desk or mail them back to us through the guard mail. Thanks very much.